are free to attend, and we do, I typically say we do more than 50 of them a year, which is true. Last year we did more than 60, and they really do span from one end of the state to the other, east to west, north to south. They're free for you all to be here, but they're not free to put on. Sponsors make it possible for us to do these events, and I want to acknowledge AT&T, BP, PepsiCo, Walmart, and Southwest Airlines, the regular sponsors of Tribune events. Today's event is also supported by the Texas Association of Dairymen. Would you give the sponsors a hand, please? Acknowledge their generous support. They make it possible for us to be here, for us to do the events we do around the state. They also, by extension, make it possible for the Tribune to do the work that it's done now for going on 9 years to provide information that the public deserves to have, to be better informed and engaged and be better citizens as a result of that. All of you who are members of the Tribune also make a significant contribution in our ability to do that. I know we have some in the room who are members, and I thank you for that. If you're not a member, we encourage you to sign up to become one. Rebecca Quarles is sitting up front, would be happy to sign you up on the way out, but if you want to become a member sitting at your seat, you can text 444-999, as the sign says. Text the word Tribune to 444-999. If you become a member today, we're more than happy to put you in a drawing for a Texas Tribune limited edition coffee mug that you can take home, have on your desk. We'd love to have you become a member, 444-999. Some events we have coming up, whether or not you're a member, we welcome you to our events. Next Thursday morning, back here at the Austin Club, 7:30 doors, 8 o'clock conversation with Jerry Patterson, the former Land Commissioner of Texas and hopes to be Land Commissioner again. He is running in one of the two big competitive statewide Republican primaries. The other one today, we have Commissioner Miller in his race, but Commissioner Patterson is running against the incumbent Commissioner George P. Bush. He'll be here next week to talk about that race. The following Monday in Dallas, we have a day-long symposium on gender and public policy that features, among others, U.S. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand will be down, interviewed by Emily Ramshaw, our editor-in-chief, Stephanie Click, Republican of Helen Giddings of DeSoto, and a number of other elected and non-elected officials will be part of that long day of conversations around gender and policy. We'll be live streaming that. If you can't be there, we're happy to have you dial up and watch it. We'll be doing a trivia night at the Driscoll Hotel on March 2nd, Texas Independence Day, part of the series of trivia nights on Texas politics and policy that we've done for a number of years now. My colleague Ross Ramsey will host that. We're back here on March 7th at the Austin Club the morning after the primary to debrief the results, as we typically do, a live recording of the Tribune's weekly podcast, the Tribcast. And then finally, around the corner at our new offices at 919 Congress on the 6th floor, the events center that we are building out that will ultimately replace most of the events here at the Austin Club. We'll bring them in-house. The first event we're doing in that space, it will not be quite finished, but we're going to do it anyway, just to give it a dry run, with the mayor of Austin, Steve Adler, who is up for re-election in 2018 on March the 8th. It's texastribune.org/events for any and all of those if you want to RSVP. If you'd like to tweet about today's event, feel free. The hashtag is TTEvents. We'll do about 35 minutes of conversation, questions from the audience from that point until just before 9, and have you out of here by 9 o'clock. All right. Now it's my pleasure to introduce this morning's guest, Sid Miller, the 12th Commissioner of the Texas Department of Agriculture. In that capacity, Mr. Miller keeps watch over an industry whose economic impact is $100 billion annually and employs 1 out of every 7 working Texans. He was elected to lead the 109-year-old state agency in 2014 and is up for re-election in 2018, facing both primary and general election opponents. Previously, Commissioner Miller served 6 terms in the Texas House as a Republican representing District 59, during which time he chaired the Agriculture and Livestock and Homeland Security and Public Safety committees. An 8th-generation farmer and rancher, he was born in De Leon, graduated from Tarleton State University in Stephenville. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Sid Miller.
Thanks, sir. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good to see you. Appreciate you being here.
Sure.
Let's acknowledge that you're a little under the weather today. It's
I'm
not,
all right.
it's not that the liberal media makes you sick, although if you want to use that line, you're welcome to.
Yeah, I think everybody's got a little something going around.
That's right. You know, Commissioner, it is not a foregone conclusion, although sometimes it seems to be, that somebody who is serving in statewide office runs for re-election. I don't take that for granted, that everybody wants to do it. It mostly often happens, but not always. So I want to ask you, first of all, why you're running again. And I want to ask you why you deserve to be reelected. I think we should make the affirmative case for your reelection, or let you make it. So tell me why you want to run again.
Well, of course, I've been in this office a little over 3 years, not quite a full term.
Yep.
Which won't be until January. But we made a lot of changes in this agency, Evans, a lot of changes for the good.
Yep.
When I took the agency over, we had an $18 million deficit. We turned that around, had it back in the black, positive. We hadn't, our organic certification program, farmers were having to wait 2.5 years to get their organic certification. We've gotten that fixed.
Yep.
It was taking us over 8 years to inspect all the fuel pumps in the state. We've got that down to 24 months. Get reelected, we'll get that down to every 12 months. Our inspectors now, we reorganized that, fired our logistics team, our contract, saved the agency over $300,000. Under our reorganization, our inspectors are driving 1.5 million miles less each biennium, and they're getting 40 to 60% more inspections done. I soon found out that there was a lot of businesses across Texas operating illegally, on illegal scales. Of course, we're the Consumer Protection Agency for the state.
Right, this is the Sid Miller versus the barbecue restaurants narrative that you like to talk about, right?
That's it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just barbecue restaurants. We launched what I called Operation Maverick. We went out and rounded up all these businesses that had never registered, had never had their scales inspected, were not necessarily selling on certifiable scales.
Right.
It was airports that weigh your luggage. It was yogurt shops. It was barbecue places, pawn shops, mail houses, pharmacies.
Yeah.
You name it. The whole.
So
the whole
this
gamut.
is a long list, and I know we could probably go even longer. A long list of accomplishments that you believe you put on the board in the first few years.
And we're still working on that.
So I'm reminded that the Department of Agriculture website very helpfully lays out these are the things that you're supposed to be doing. They put it out: promote production, agriculture, consumer protection, economic development, healthy living. Those are the 4 things that you're supposed to be doing if you are a proper steward of this agency. And you've named a bunch of things that fit in those categories. Right. You feel like you've stayed pretty much within those guardrails.
We have stayed in those guardrails. Matter of fact, it's a little more than 4. That's in general.
But it's those are the big 4.
There's over 130 statutory functions that the legislature requires us to perform. Right. And we have performance measures that we're to meet to show that we're doing our job. Right. So that's what we've been doing. Of course, it's a $6 billion agency. Yeah. That's a larger budget than 31 governors have. Right. So it's no small agency.
Commissioner, of course, the decision to run for re-election is about the next 4 years as well as the last 4. And so you've talked about the stuff you put on the board. What work is left to be done? In other words, presumably you're not just running for re-election to run in place. Your intention is to do more things, maybe things you didn't get done in the first 4 years, or things that maybe you didn't try to get done in the first 4, but you'd like to get done. So what's the theory of the case for the next 4 years here? Why are we going to be better off with you in that job?
Well, we're going to continue to work on reorganizing and retooling the agency. Right. We've got in pretty good shape, but we're only about 80% there. One of the things that we're really focusing on, 2 areas, is food nutrition. That's our largest segment. $5 billion of the $6 billion is food nutrition. Yeah. So we're working very hard to make school lunches great again. When I took over, instead of having healthy kids, we had healthy trash cans. The school lunches were going in the trash. I rolled back all the mandates, and I'm a local control proponent. So we did away with all the mandates that the Texas Department of Agriculture had put on our schools. We trashed those.
Well, you understand, Commissioner, I mean, we don't need to go back over this stuff. This is long ago, and we've actually been on this stage talking about this before, but it's always great to hear you talk about we're going to make school lunches healthy again, but you're also the guy who brought cupcakes and deep fryers back into the schools. There does seem to be some kind of dissonance there.
Actually, I did not put those back in the school. We leave that up to the local district to decide if they want those or not.
Yes, stipulated. You undid the mandate, which had the practical effect of putting them back into schools. It's tomato here.
If they want to.
Fried tomato, honestly. Yeah.
If they want to, they can. Yeah. It's not mandatory.
Okay.
And actually, there's, just while you're on that subject, there's over 31 items on the federal lunch program that are approved to be served fried.
Certified?
to serve fries.
Oh, okay. I was like, boy, that's the
Serve fries.
Freudian slip of all time. That's it. Yeah. Yeah.
So my thinking is cowboy logic. I use a lot of cowboy logic. Is it better to cut up that potato fresh, maybe from a local grower, organically grown, or is it better to order it from Cisco's Kitchen where it's, frozen, flash frozen with additives, preservatives,
All
and
kinds of
dyes in it.
chemicals inside.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Right.
So we just give that option to the local school district
Right.
where they want to do that.
You like the Trump administration better than the Obama administration stipulated.
You think?
You think?
Really?
What is the practical impact in your last couple of years of having Trump in there instead of Obama, from the standpoint of how your agency has operated?
Well, in the prior administration,
Not just that you've been inspired in your tweeting habits by the president. We'll get to that.
the prior administration, I spent probably 30 or 40% of my time fighting back against an overreaching federal government.
Yeah.
I was suing the EPA, or Waters of the U.S. I was suing the Corps of Engineers. I was fighting the Bureau of Land Management up on the Red River. They were trying to seize 90,000 acres of farm and ranch land with zero compensation to those landowners.
Yes.
Fighting Fish and Wildlife Service, fighting the Endangered Species Act, all of that. And continuous, more regulations, oversight. It was just a never-ending battle.
Right.
So
You have more control of your agency and more control of what you need to do in the state now.
now that we have a new administration, I'm actually working with this administration. I was actually asked to form an Agriculture Advisory Committee for the Trump administration, which I did, put about 30 people on it. So I have the cell phone of the Secretary of Agriculture now, and he has mine. So we're working, instead of working against each other, we're working towards each other. I spent a week in Denver at the Tri-National Agriculture Card, representing Texas on the NAFTA issue.
Right.
So it's a working relationship instead of an adversary. It's daylight and dark, basically, Evans.
Commissioner, it's all sunny and rosy, and everything that you're talking about is positive accomplishments and everything else. If that's the case, why didn't the Republican Party clear your primary, stand aside, and just walk you hand in hand back into office? Why do you have a challenger if that's the case?
Well, I've run lots of races. I think I've had over 35 or 36 opponents. I've never not had an opponent. So.
Right.
That's something I can't control.
Yeah.
I've got two in the Republican primary, and I actually have a Democrat in the general.
Yes.
They're actually all three Democrats. One of them actually got the Democrat nomination in the last election.
Right. Yeah. Well.
And,
We can agree that Mr. Hogan is an interesting character to be part of this conversation. His name will not be mentioned again on this stage, however. Well, let me ask you about your own view of your record. Understandably, is a positive one, and you put forward, I think, a pretty good affirmative case for your time in office and your reelection. I want to talk to you about some of the questions that have come up in the context of this campaign, not just by your principal opponent in the primary, Mr. Blocker, whom we'll get to, but just generally speaking, let me give you an opportunity to answer some of the things that have been said about you. So the attacks on your first 4 years and the questions raised about the prospect of 4 more are in a couple of different buckets. Let's begin with the ethics bucket.
Okay.
You have been fined a number of times between 2007 and 2017 by the Texas Ethics Commission for either not properly filing financial disclosure reports or for not reporting political contributions. You've paid fines. Any reason why we should consider that a matter of concern?
Every election I've been in, somebody files an ethics complaint. It doesn't mean that there's a violation.
Right.
Sometimes they file the same complaint every election.
Right.
And so they could, your opponent uses that to get headlines. Well, Miller's under investigation by the Texas Ethics Commission.
But the fact is, a number of these filings have been found by the Ethics Commission to be legit, and you've paid fines.
Most of them have been dismissed.
But you have paid fines, right?
There are some.
Yeah.
Errors and omissions. I think I forgot to list a donor's occupation.
Right.
We had a misplaced decimal on one. A wrong date on a deposit on one.
So minor stuff, nothing that we should be concerned about.
No, absolutely not.
Right. There's been some question raised about your use of bonus payments within the agency. That in the first, and I think I wrote down the total. It was $413,700 that you paid out in bonuses, one-time cash rewards to 144 employees between January and September of 2015, your first 9 months in office. That was the most of any statewide elected official at the time, and it was more than the total in bonuses during that time given out by Greg Abbott, Ken Paxton, and Glenn Hager combined.
That's true.
That continues to dog you as a sign that somehow you're spending taxpayer monies needlessly or recklessly. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's not a true statement. When I took the agency over, I mentioned earlier that we were 2.5 years behind on the organic certification program. It was over 8 years to get the pumps inspected. We had over 2,000 case backlog in our legal department.
Right.
Many of them had just been thrown in the trash and not adjudicated.
Yeah.
I'd never seen a place with as low a morale as the Texas Department of Agriculture when I got there. So
Todd Staples did a bad job running it?
He ran it the way he wanted to run it. I'm running it a lot different. I don't have anything disparaging to say about Todd. He ran it the way he wanted to run it.
Right.
And he ran it.
Well, that low morale didn't happen on its own. Theoretically, you're criticizing the previous administration.
The fact is the morale was an all-time low, and production was horrible. So I went through and we did employee evaluations. And those 144 employees are mid-management, people that actually pull the wagon.
Yeah.
For the no executive salary got any of those bonuses. And I went through and evaluated, found out where the dead wood was, who was just taking up oxygen, who was doing above their job, and we rewarded those employees. And because of that, we probably got that back tenfold. We got that organic portion fixed. We worked through our legal backlog. We got a new program in to get all the inspections done that hadn't been done. We rounded up all those businesses that weren't registered. So, and you have to keep this in perspective, okay? This is a $6 billion agency.
We're talking about a drop in the bucket from a
$6 billion agency, $400,000. That's less than 0.1%.
Did you follow the rules, Commissioner Miller, in terms of how you rewarded these people on a one-time basis? A state audit of the agency's management and use of funds has suggested that there are rules in place for allocating merit pay, and that this process that you put into place may not have been aligned with the proper process of the agency.
I think it was exactly in line. I've never heard that before.
You have no question as to whether what you, not only the sort of philosophical notion of what you did, but the way that you executed upon it is proper?
Exactly.
What about the decision to, within the first few months in office, bring in 9 additional people at a senior level at $180,000 of salary, including 4 new assistant or deputy commissioner positions? Again, that has been pointed to repeatedly over the time you've been in office as a sign of you not being a particular fiscal conservative. Why are you creating a bunch of new executive management and high salaries at the agency?
When I took the agency over, I looked at the salaries of the previous executive staff. And I thought, I can't hire the kind of people I need to hire for those kind of salaries.
Right.
So I brought the finance people in. I said, how much is the previous administration paying for the executive staff? They said, well, in total, it's this much. I don't remember what the number was.
Yeah.
But it's this much. I said, okay. I said, how many people are on that level, executive level? They said, 14. I said, okay. I said, so how much can I pay them if I just hire 9? They said, well, you can pay them a lot more. You can pay them $180,000 and still not spend all the money. So that's what I did. I went out and hired the very best people I could.
Right.
Poached them. No one was looking for a job. I got them from somewhere else.
But pretty high salaries, wouldn't you say?
They're pretty high salaries, but I'm spending less than the previous administration. But the people I hired can do more. So I've got 9 where the previous administration had 14 and spending less on administration costs than the previous commissioner.
So when fiscal conservatives commissioners say, someone like Sid Miller runs and argues that government needs to be smaller, he's a sort of conservative mantra that we have to reduce the size of government, we have to shrink the size of government, and yet he's paying $100,000 in bonuses, he's paying $100,000 to these new positions he's created. It feels like you're saying one thing and doing the other. Your response to that is what?
I'd say you'd be wrong, because I'm actually spending less than the previous administration.
Yeah, you're just reallocating resources.
Yeah.
Just
run it like a business. Run it like my business. I look at this as I am the head of a Fortune 500 company, a $6 billion company.
Right.
And I've got to run it like that efficiently, economically as I can. And so that's how I knew I needed really, really good people in there to straighten this mess out. I try to hire people that are smarter than me and let them tell me what I need to do. That's my philosophy.
Commissioner, last time we were together on this stage was March of 2016. I remember that because it was the day before I interviewed President Obama, and you told me I was having a good week, and I said, yeah, I'm interviewing Sid Miller. Right, that was my good week. So it actually was it was before the Jesus shot controversy. We never got a chance to talk about that, and I thought, what kind of a job would I be doing if I didn't ask about that? Both the Jesus shot and the National Dixie Rodeo controversies, which came up in the months following the last time we were together, got to the question of whether, again, under the banner of ethics, it was your policy at the agency to use taxpayer dollars for private trips or private purposes. Texas Rangers investigated at least one of those.
That was not my policy.
No, but that was the allegation.
That's the allegation,
You said
not
it was
my
not your
policy.
policy. No, I understand that. But the allegation was he's using state funds to go to Oklahoma to get this Jesus shot, or he's going to Mississippi to compete in a National Dixie Rodeo. You were investigated, and ultimately nothing came of that stuff. Right. But you understand that in politics, perception is as important as reality.
Sure.
You know, they convict you on page A1, they acquit you on page C23. What a lot of people remember is Jesus shot, he spent state taxpayer dollars to go to the rodeo and all that. I know that you were effectively exonerated of that, but would you not do that again if you could go back in time?
You know, here's where that happened. That all happened within my first 30 days of office. We probably should do something about this, but when you become the ag commissioner, unlike a county judge or a DPS officer or a county prosecutor or a commissioner, they all send you to commissioner school or judges school to kind of train you, to get ready for that job.
Right.
When you take over this $6 billion agency, they just hand you the keys and there it is.
Well, you didn't have to run for it. I mean, it's not like we forced you to do the job.
I'm just trying to explain why this came about.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to learn how to run this agency. So I make an appointment with the Secretary of Agriculture in Oklahoma. So I go to Oklahoma. We get hung up at the airport over a car rental. I'm not approved. Should have been approved. I can't get the car. I missed my appointment. And so when I return from Oklahoma, before, and this is where the papers get it wrong, before any complaints filed, any newspaper story, I reimburse the state for the trip. I go to Mississippi, the same way. I did not enter the rodeo, by the way. I met with the Commissioner of Agriculture twice down there, but because she was a campaign supporter and mentor, I didn't count that as a state trip. I had a meeting set up with the Catfish Institute, Roger Barlow down there, and that one fell through. So immediately when I got back, I reimbursed the state for that trip.
Right.
Long before anybody ever filed a complaint.
So this is much ado about
George Soros Group, Progress Texas, is the one that filed the complaints. Of course, as you said, the Texas Rangers have to, if there's a complaint filed, they have to investigate.
Yeah.
Found nothing. Rosemary Lindbergh, DA here in Travis County, said, no, nothing here.
Yeah. So this is all, again, nothing. If your opponents or anybody, your political opponents, bring up the question of these trips or the use of state taxpayer deals, there's nothing to that.
There's nothing to it.
Right. Let me ask you about the fee increases, Commissioner. This has, again, been a point of controversy. And back to this question of the state auditor's report of your work in the first 4 years. This is what, among the findings of the state auditor's report, this is what they found. That your fee increases on Texas farmers and ranchers raised millions more than actually was necessary. You generated $27.3 million in fee increases during the 2016 year, but the programs relying on those fees cost less than $21 million. They're alleging, the auditor alleged, that you collected almost $7 million more than was necessary to operate, or about 31% more than was necessary. You know that these fee increases were a point of controversy all throughout the 2017 and 2015 legislative sessions. You had Republican legislators, not Democrats, not George Soros political opponents, but Republicans attacking you for the fee increases. You had people in the industry, people who are the recipients of these fee increases, on whose shoulders they were placed, complaining. Even Dan Patrick complained that the fee increases were too much. Can you tell us what the real story is here about this?
Well, what that audit says, if you read it closely, it says we collected $7 million more than we needed after we raised the fees.
Right.
What it doesn't go in, if you have to really delve into it, is that $7 million did not come from charging too much for the fees. Where that $7 million come from, and I mentioned this earlier, is driving 1.5 million miles less, It came from registering 7,000 new devices that weren't on the rolls. It came from doing away with the contract, the logistics contract for $300,000.
So you're saying that
So
you don't believe you have a problem of the fees having been raised too much?
We actually hit those fees, with the exception of two.
Yeah.
We hit those fees right on target. We were right on the money on.
Do you think industry views the fee increases as no big deal, no big whoop?
Here's the reason that the industry doesn't like it. Prior to me to adjusting the fees in the past, the agency had been funded by fees, 50%, and the other 50% came from taxpayers, came from general revenue. The legislature took that away. So we're no longer now subsidizing Buc-ee's and HEB and Valero and Farmers Pesticide License and, and Starbucks. So we actually are a pay-as-you-go agency now. We pay our own way. We don't use any taxpayer dollars whatsoever. So the subsidies are gone. And of course, yeah, they're upset because now they're having to pay the full, cost of the services that we provide them.
Little guy feels like they're eating it. I mean, in some ways, it's a comparable conversation to the one that happens over here on public education. State gets out of the business of funding it, and then the cost of that shifts over to the local guys. I mean, that's what you hear on public education now. It sounds to me like, yeah, the state may not be funding it to the same degree, but at the end of the day, someone's paying, and who's paying is the little guy. Industry is paying.
That's who should pay. Taxpayers shouldn't be subsidizing HEB or Buc-ee's or Valero's or Starbucks.
So once again, if you could go back and look at the fee increase schedule that you put into place over the first few years and look at it again, you'd do the same thing.
We hit it right on the money, the fee schedule.
Okay. Let me ask you about immigration, Commissioner. This is a topic that does not naturally set up under the umbrella of the Department of Agriculture. I mean, you wouldn't think about immigration as your responsibility, but you've taken a pretty active role in this. You've spoken out quite a bit about it. Your Republican opponent in this race is doing what I consider to be, at least in theory, the impossible. He's trying to make you out to be a communist, a liberal on immigration. Sid Miller is not far enough to the right on immigration. He's too far left on immigration. I want to ask you about the things that have been alleged, because I think of you as pretty conservative, but he's trying to make you out to be liberal. He says, first of all, on the border wall, that you have been willing to turn over too much of the control of this conversation to Mexico. And in fact, our reporter, Julian Aguilar, asked you about the border wall recently, and this is what you said. And apparently this quote is part of the issue that your opponent is making. If we're going to build a wall, Mexico needs some input on that. That's your words. We don't want to just build it and not know what the consequences are. We want input. We want to be educated. We need to be educated. And we need collaboration working together, and we need cooperation to go in. I don't mind saying that. That has been taken by some as you capitulating to Mexico. Whereas the president's position is we're going to build a wall whether or not Mexico wants it. He said at various points Mexico's going to pay for it or not. But he doesn't seem to believe that we need Mexico's buy-in, collaboration, or permission to build a wall. And it sounds from this quote like you do.
We do not need Mexico's permission to build the wall.
Yeah.
What I had told the governor, and I've developed a relationship with Governor Francisco Cabeza de Vaca, governor of Tamaulipas,
who's a Texan by birth.
Who's a Texan by birth. And what you have to understand is through those 17 ports at Laredo, Texas, 80% of NAFTA comes through there. $1 billion a day. 14,000 trucks. So it's very important that we keep those relationships open. So my appeal to the governor was, look, if Donald Trump says he's going to build a wall, we're going to build a wall. If he says you're going to pay for it, you're going to pay for it. You may not write us a check, but through tariffs or excise taxes, some way, we're going to get reimbursed for that wall. You know, you might as well get on board instead of fighting us on it and have some input in it. It would be much better to your advantage, to both of our countries, if we could get along.
So basically, this is going to happen. It can either happen with or without your being part of the conversation.
That's it.
Nothing liberal about that?
No.
Nothing capitulating about that?
I don't think there's anything wrong with extending a hand of friendship to your neighbor. Ask them to be a partner with you. And, you know, but I don't think they're going to do it, but the offer was made.
Is that in any way, though, at odds with the idea that we set our own course and that we don't need to be particularly neighborly to Mexico because Mexico is not the solution, Mexico is the problem? That does seem to be the tenor and the tone coming out of this administration, which you support.
I think we need a tone of cooperation with all of our neighbors. I don't think we need to be adversarial to our neighbors. I mean,
Right. But you are supportive of the wall. There's no question.
Oh, absolutely.
You're not one inch away from the president.
We need 1,800 miles of wall. We've already built 600 of it.
Right.
I mean, it's a third of it's there. We're building the wall.
You understand this?
We're not going to build
the
the wall.
structural issues with building a wall are that there are parts of the border that simply will not accommodate a wall. There are geographic areas of the border that ultimately put Texans, not Mexicans, in some divided position. And as we, along with ProPublica, reported over the last couple of months, the last time that the federal government attempted to engage Texans on getting their land for the purpose of building a wall didn't go so well, and it was rife with mismanagement and corruption. Any concerns? What can you say to Texans to assure them that the process of building the wall this time will go any better than it went back in 10 years ago or so?
Well, you'd mentioned, I think in my introduction, that I chaired the Homeland Security and Public Safety Committee.
Yes.
So I worked with Governor Perry on securing the border, worked with helped put the DPS down there, the Texas Rangers, the gunboats back on the river.
Right.
I've been down there and seen those walls, and they work. They absolutely work. They're great asset.
And you're referring to physical walls, not existential walls.
Physical walls.
Right. So you're not a believer or susceptible to the belief that you build a 10-foot wall, they build an 11-foot ladder. That ultimately any barrier can be gotten over.
I haven't seen any 10-foot walls down there. They're a lot taller than that. But anyway, I've heard that theory before. And there may be some areas where there's a 200-foot sheer cliff that we may not necessarily need a wall on top of the cliff. I mean, that's probably a pretty good barrier. You can barrier itself.
But where a wall can be built, a physical wall, not a technological wall.
That's true.
You believe a physical wall should be built. Absolutely. And who do you believe should pay for it?
We should build it immediately and secure the border.
But with what money, Commissioner?
With our money. And we will get reimbursed at some point.
How are we going to do that?
We will do that through taxes, excise taxes, import tariffs, things like that.
You don't worry about unintended consequences on a tariff structure that somehow will adversely affect us in other ways?
That's always a concern, and we're discussing that through NAFTA now.
I mean, the idea is if we somehow put higher taxes on Mexican imports, that ultimately it's going to be Austin guacamole eaters who are going to pay for this wall. No?
It could possibly be passed on. We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a ways down the road.
And what about the idea that Texas landowners deserve to be treated respectfully and fairly by the federal government? Again, 10 years ago, our reporting shows that was absolutely not the case. What guarantees can you give Texans that in the course of this wall being built, they're not going to get screwed in this deal?
Well, I'll tell you about that. I've been down there. I know a lot of those ranchers. They're afraid to even go on their own property. It has decimated property values down there.
So you think public safety is a greater concern than property rights down there?
I'm just telling you, the private property owners down there are really suffering. Their property values are down.
Right.
They can't operate. They can't farm. They can't run cattle without fear of losing their own life or being attacked. Most of them that I know, maybe not all of them, most of them I know would welcome some kind of security so they could actually get back on their family farms and ranches and have agricultural production again.
That's their first concern.
Yeah.
Right. On the question of the economy, Commissioner, you've been pretty outspoken about NAFTA. Mm-hmm. This is obviously a topic of some anxiety in Texas. You know, NAFTA has been beneficial in many respects to the economy in Texas. There are a lot of elected officials of both parties in Texas who are apprehensive, to say the least, about President Trump's statements about NAFTA and the idea that somehow we're going to just kind of get out of NAFTA or we're going to renegotiate NAFTA in a way that will adversely affect the Texas economy. Reassure us. What is your position? Because you have also seemed to be open to the idea that NAFTA seems to be changed in some way. So how is that not going to adversely affect the economy of Texas?
Well, that document is like 24 years old, and I've talked with the governor of Tamaulipas. I said, look, this document is 24 years old. It's kind of like a house you built 24 years ago.
It needs updating.
It's got to be updated. Yeah. Markets change, economies change.
You think it reflects assumptions made? It reflects assumptions made at the time.
At the time, which not necessarily meets today's standards. So yes, we need to renegotiate that. That needs to be a floor. We don't need to make it worse, and we won't make it worse. Excuse me. Donald Trump's a tough negotiator. He's a deal maker. Yeah, that's his deal. He's a deal maker.
Can you give me any? I don't want to get into politics here, but can you give me any evidence over the last year plus that the president is a tough negotiator?
Sure. We are now sending beef to China. We hadn't done that in 14 years. We're sending rice to China. We've never sent them any rice ever in the history of the United States.
And that's on the president for having orchestrated
in the last 12 months.
Right.
Absolutely.
So you believe that that's...
soybean exports to China. We have, right now, the third time all high agriculture exports in our nation's history. And it's because of the trade and the deal-making of the Trump administration.
It's all within the last 15 months or 14 months.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yes,
so
sir.
you're confident that the deal-making of the president will result in a great deal on NAFTA that will not harm the economy in Texas?
We'll see. We don't know what that's going to end up. We will be better off if we get a new NAFTA deal.
Right.
And it's not going to be, the problem is not going to be Mexico. You know, I've negotiated with
The problem going to be Canada? What's it going to be?
The problem is Canada. And on the agriculture end of it especially, on dairy, and on...
Why don't we build a wall with Canada? How about that?
Well, I don't think we need to do that, but anyway, they manipulate. We may actually end up taking them to the WTO in a lawsuit over the wheat and the dairy issue, and even wine is a problem. They just don't seem to want to budge. And if NAFTA falls through, it will not be the United States' fault or Mexico's fault. I predict that it will be a issue with Canada not wanting to compromise.
With regard to walls and borders and Mexico specifically, there's been a lot of discussion of who should or should not be allowed in this country for the purpose of living here and for the purpose of working here. You are the steward of an industry, by extension of your job as commissioner, that employs immigrant labor to the tune of about 26 or 27%, I believe, of the industry is immigrant labor. Are you worried about tightening immigration laws and either removing people or keeping people from coming to this country, and that having an adverse effect on the workforce of the industry that you represent?
Well, what we need is a workable immigration. There's not a dairyman or a farmer or a produce grower growing strawberries or onions that wants to work illegal labor. There's no. But you
acknowledge that there is undocumented labor all throughout the agriculture industry.
Absolutely.
So if you had the Sid Miller wand that you could wave over the agriculture industry, would you remove all undocumented labor tomorrow?
Yes, we would, and replace it with legal labor.
Well, the former is easy. The latter is hard. I don't think the former is easy in a literal sense, but getting rid of undocumented labor is a lot easier than revising the immigration system to make it so that now all of a sudden we replace that undocumented labor with documented labor.
Actually, it wouldn't be that hard.
How's that? You may be the first person to ever say that fixing this is easy, so go ahead, tell me how that's going.
Well, again, you just use a little cowboy logic. What we have now is a guest worker program. There's certain allotment. Only so many can come up. They come up, and then they're supposed to complete their tenure here, and then go back to Mexico after 10 months or whatever their contract is. But they don't do that. They just kind of fade off into the shadows, and that holds a spot, and they go work somewhere else outside of agriculture. So now there's these slots that we can't fill, and we can't get the workers back to the dairies and to the farms and ranches. What needs to happen is we need to give them an incentive to go home. Right now, the illegals are paying a coyote, $2,000 to $10,000 to smuggle them across the Rio Grande. They're making them carry a 49-pound pack of dope with them. A lot of them are left abandoned. So what we need to do is set up a program where they could apply. We do background checks. If everything checks out, they pay for the program. United States taxpayers does not pay for it.
Yeah.
So they come up here, they fulfill their contract, and we do a withholding out of their paycheck. Social Security withholding, but there's another withholding. I don't know what the numbers are. The numbers crunchers can tell you. Let's say it's 20%.
Right.
You fulfill your contract, you return to Mexico or South America, wherever you come from, and you get that reimbursed. It's just like getting your income tax check back if you paid too much in.
It sounds complicated.
And then if they come back, if they default,
Yeah.
that money goes back into the program to help pay for it. The taxpayers don't pay for anything.
Commissioner, it sounds complicated, and the question is, would anybody be able to come to the table and agree on a program like this? I mean,
It's almost too simple.
What have we seen over the last 24 hours, but even best intentions, the inability of our government to come up with a fix? I mean, 4 different immigration proposals that included funding for a border wall yesterday, which, a lot of Democrats in Congress probably thought they would never be on board with. We've moved now where that's sort of the new floor. They can't even agree on something. I mean, again, 4 different things yesterday, they can't agree. How do we fix this problem? And ultimately, again, what is the impact on Texas? We have the most contiguous miles with the Mexican border of any state. The question of undocumented immigration and undocumented labor is a Texas problem as much as it's a problem or a challenge for any other state. So this is not just an immaterial conversation for us.
Well, this would take away the undocumented immigrants sneaking across to come up here and work.
Right.
They could come legally. Now then, all of a sudden, the border's a whole lot easier to secure if you only have drug trafficking coming through, because it narrows the scope a lot. Probably cuts out 95% of the human traffic coming across.
Commissioner, what do you do about the so-called DACA kids, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals? We have, again, Texas is second to California in the number of those DACA residents in Texas. There's an attempt, again, being made so far unsuccessfully to come up with a solution for that. Again, if you had the Sid Miller wand that you could wave over this, would you send all the DACA kids away, or would you keep them here?
We certainly can't give them citizenship. You can't reward illegal behavior, even though in most cases it's not their fault.
Kids who came over here, the theory of this whole thing is the kids came over here without, it's not, they didn't make this choice themselves.
But they're still here illegally.
Right.
So you can't give them citizenship. But we do need to have compassion toward them and have them some type of program where they could work toward a legal status, but not citizenship.
Not always. One of the things that people talk about when they talk about the undocumented immigration question in this country is magnets that we create for that. Again, your principal opponent in the Republican primary has called you out for being too soft on immigration and cited specifically your vote in 2001 to allow in-state tuition, which is often seen to be a magnet. Now, let's acknowledge that was passed by the legislature. Governor Perry was a supporter of it at the time. In fact, arguably, his 2012 presidential campaign was impaled on that, not on oops, when he got booed at that Tea Party debate in Florida over that very question. Have you changed your position on that?
I have not. And what that's really kind of, you can't do it in an elevator speech, but that bill was in 2001,
yes.
17 years ago. Senator Jane Knapp, we were going through in-state tuition. And at the time, and I may not have this may not be totally accurate because it's been 17 years, but if I recall, to get in-state tuition, you had to be a resident of Texas for 2 years and graduate from a Texas high school or equivalent.
Right, there were a bunch of conditions.
And you would receive in-state tuition. That's your Texas resident. Jane Nelson had language to say, oh, well, that makes these illegals here eligible for in-state tuition. So she added language that said, and a U.S. citizen are on the pathway to citizenship. I voted for it. It passed the House 142-1. It passed the Senate unanimously, and Governor Perry signed it, and that's the law today.
Yep.
So actually, illegal alien DACA kids can't get in-state tuition unless they're on a pathway to citizenship. Unfortunately, I don't think many of our universities are enforcing that. There's no enforcement mechanism. That's where the fault lies in.
So nothing not conservative about being an advocate for that position?
No. No, it actually took it away from them instead of gave it to them. They already had it under the current law.
Commissioner, I alluded earlier to your tweeting. Really, it's more Facebooking than tweeting, or it's a combination of both. I want to ask you about this in all sincerity. One of the main lines of commentary about your time in office has been your loose tongue on social media. Whether it's literally you or whether it's somebody on your staff, ultimately you bear the responsibility for it. I could have written an entire page of things that you've been criticized for over time. Comparing refugees to snakes, joking about a Pakistani suicide hotline, successfully offending both Pakistanis and people with mental health issues in the same fell swoop. sharing a Facebook post calling for the atomic bombing of the Muslim world. When the Nunes memo came out, you tweeted, Democrats haven't been this upset over Republicans releasing something since Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. And you called Hillary Clinton the C word on Twitter. Not to mention the fact that you seem to have a habit of sharing what to the untrained eye is obviously fake news repeatedly in your feed, for which you have also been criticized. You have anything you regret in all that? And do you worry that the impression that people have of you and your office, which is an important office, in state and out of state, is shame over that kind of behavior on social media?
Oh, I don't think so. We get a lot of positive comments. So we're very active on Facebook, as you say. You know, I put up probably 120 to 150 posts per week, more than anybody else. We have more engagements than all the other statewide.
And I agree, they don't all advocate bombing the Muslim world. But the point is, some of these things do. And do you feel like that's an appropriate way that you should be acting as a statewide elected official?
You know, I guess that's debatable, but that's my personality. You know, that's kind of who I am. I mean, Donald Trump tweets and he gets criticized for it, but I was kind of doing it before he did it, actually. But we put all those posts up.
Yeah, you're not Trumpy and he's Millerian. That's exactly right.
We're very diligent in trying, you know, since my election, that's probably 30 or 40,000 posts, you know, and you mentioned 3 or 4 there. And we try very, very hard not to get duped on something, but every once in a while, one gets through. Yeah. And we put it up. You mentioned the one about the suicide post, you know. The guy said, well, you know, I felt suicidal and I got to call the suicide hotline and I got a, you know, call center in Pakistan and they asked me if I could drive a truck. You know, I saw that and that was up about 30 minutes. And I reread that and I thought, you know, that's probably offensive. But that was insensitive, so I took it down. But
is anybody considering you on the ballot this spring or this fall, Commissioner, have reason to question your judgment?
And what happened, the media is one that took that off and put it out there and everybody saw it. They repeated it and repeated it. So
it's the media's fault? The media called Hillary Clinton the C word, Commissioner?
I think they're insensitive by reposting that suicide thing. I mean, I took it down.
But you're not insensitive for putting it up to begin with?
I said I was. Yeah. That's why I took it down.
I mean, look, the media is, you know, stipulated. The media has lots of things that it's guilty of occasionally and commits lots of sins. But it sounds to me like you're blaming the media for your stuff. If it's wrong because you did it, not because we reported on it.
I am blaming the media for perpetuating that because they kept it in the news for like 3 or 4 days.
Well, Commissioner, I promise we'll make a deal. I'll make a deal with you on behalf of the media.
People that had lost a loved one to suicide kept seeing that.
I'll make a deal with you on behalf of the media. If you stop making news, we'll stop reporting it. How about that?
Okay.
Okay?
Right.
Commissioner, at the debate in Tyler, you were asked by Joanne Fleming of the Grassroots America group whether you had any regrets, whether you had made any mistakes in the time that you were in office. And this was your exact quote: "If I think of one, I'll let you know, but I can't think of one." Right. We're all flawed human beings, Commissioner. Seriously, you've made no mistakes in office that you can think of, not just counting the things we just talked about? You couldn't think of one thing that was a regret?
At the time I couldn't. I've had time to reflect on that.
Okay, so tell me the things you regret.
It was about 6 months ago. I was down in South Texas. And we were supposed to, after an event, we went out to this great Mexican food restaurant. I'll not make that mistake again. I'll never go back there. It was terrible. We all got sick.
So that was your regret?
That's it, yeah.
Really?
I wouldn't do that again.
So bad chili is a regret?
That's it, yeah.
That's it?
Yeah, pretty much.
On the question of grassroots, I mentioned Joanne Fleming and Grassroots America. So the newspapers in the primary season have so far, the big ones, have endorsed your opponent, Trey Blocker.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Chronicle, Express News, Dallas Morning News principally endorsed Trey Blocker. Right. You and I can agree that if newspaper endorsements mattered, Bill White would have been governor.
Sure.
Or would have been running against Kay Bailey Hutchison in 2010. Wendy Davis would be governor. I mean, you know how this goes. The newspaper, Dan Patrick would never have beat David Dewhurst. You know how this is. Okay.
The same newspapers that also endorsed Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama have endorsed my opponent.
Peace.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to worry about newspaper endorsements. I am going to worry about the Grassroots America endorsement. That came out yesterday afternoon, and I read that thing a couple times, and I thought to myself, damn. Joanne Fleming is not the editorial page editor of the Houston Chronicle. She's not a member of the lamestream media, okay? This is a very conservative group, and she is a very conservative. In fact, in some respects, she's an iconic Tea Party figure. This is some of the things that they said in endorsing Trey Blocker over you, and they endorsed you in 2014. Grassroots America endorsed you in 2014, but they're endorsing Trey Blocker this time, and this is some of the things they said. Sid Miller is ill-equipped to answer the most basic questions about how his agency operates, how decisions were and are made, and what he intends to do if reelected. They referred to your empire-building proclivities. They talked about your cavalier attitude about the amount of money you spent, and they said you never take responsibility for your mistakes. What's your response to Joanne Fleming and that group?
Well, she's obviously wrong. She has a personal grudge against me. For what reason, I really don't know.
Wasn't a personal grudge against you 4 years ago when she endorsed you?
No, but something.
So what happened in the last 4 years?
I wished I know. I don't know what went on there, but she is in a very small minority. I'll tell you that, because every other Tea Party group, every conservative group, Governor Perry, Governor Mike Huckabee, Sheriff Joe R. Powell, Joe the Plumber, Alan West, Michael Quinn Sullivan, Empire, Texas, Jonathan Sines, Kelly Shackelford, David Barton, the list goes on and on and on. 70% of the SREC has endorsed my campaign.
So she's in the minority.
She is in a very small minority.
Right.
Very small minority.
You don't like Trey Blocker.
I like Trey. I think
you
he's
do?
okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is you've made the affirmative case for yourself. What's the negative case against him? By the way, I resisted the temptation to get Nutella to be a sponsor of today's event. What is your negative case against Trey Blocker?
Well, he poses himself as a pure conservative, and he's not. He's voted in the Democrat primary.
He voted, from what I can tell, I went back and looked this up.
Yeah.
From what I can tell, he voted one time in the Democratic primary.
He did.
And the one time he voted was 2008, when, at the instruction of Rush Limbaugh, he crossed over into the Democratic primary to vote for Hillary Clinton, to get Clinton to be the nominee, unsuccessfully. It's always a fool's errand to do this. But to vote for Clinton over Obama. Can you point to another time when Mr. Blocker has voted in the Democratic primary?
So
that
may or may not be true. But I'll tell you this. In the race for lieutenant governor, between Dan Patrick and Letitia Van de Putte, he funded Letitia Van de Putte. And while he was working as he says, a consultant for Dan Patrick. He's also given tens of thousands of dollars to Democrats. He's been a consultant to several Democrats.
Of course, he says that the money he gave the Democrats, and I'm not supporting him on this, I'm simply reporting that his response in the press to this has been, I gave money to Democrats when I was in the lobby, when I was a consultant, when I was in business, and when you're in business, you got to work with everybody. You got to work with both sides. And it's not uncommon. I'd name a bunch of conservative lobbyists who will send checks to Democrats in the legislature because that's what they do for business.
Okay, well, let's just say that's true. But the fallacy in that is he wrote a $2,500 check to the Democrat Party, which you don't have to do for your consulting business, at the beginning of the session, which they promptly used to fight Governor Abbott's Sanctuary City bill.
Well, was the money specified for that purpose, or did it just go into a big bucket?
I'm sure it went into a big bucket.
So you don't know what it went to fund?
Well, I know that was their main focus.
Maybe it bought wax mustache for Gilberto Hinojosa. I mean, we don't know what it actually did. I mean, you have no idea what that money went to. Do you have a problem with him being a lobbyist or having been a lobbyist?
No, I don't think so. I mean, but
haven't you attacked him at every turn for calling him a former Monsanto lobbyist? Haven't you used those words yourself?
Well, actually, he still is. I mean, he still owns his lobby company. He hasn't divested of the company. He still owns it.
I guess my question is, do you consider having been a lobbyist to be a ding on him or a precondition to not be qualified for this job?
I don't have anything against lobbyists. Now, the type of lobbyist he is something I would never be. He lobbies for gambling, liquor, payday loans, big tobacco.
So the client list is the issue.
The client list is the issue.
Because I went back and looked. I remembered, I thought that when you exited the legislature before you ran for this office, that you yourself had been a lobbyist.
I was.
You were. And you had 9 clients, from what I could tell, as of 2013. And I believe that the way that they report this stuff, you don't actually know the exact amount, but the maximum contract amount was $370,000, at least as of the report that I saw. And you had the nurserymen, but you had some technology companies, you had some out-of-state stuff that you did work for. Anything wrong with lobbying as a way to make money?
No, I don't think so. And I said I don't begrudge him being a lobbyist. It's just the type of lobbyist he is.
It's the specific clients that you have an issue with. I pulled we'll go to questions in a second. I pulled the financials for the campaign at this point. As of January 25th, Mr. Blocker had more than $400,000 cash on hand, slightly more than you. Right? In the first 25, close though, it was within a rounding error. First 25 days of 2018, he outraised you by about 9 times from what I show. We're now a little bit further into it. In fact, now people are beginning to talk about the first 45 days that they were able to raise money. We saw one major candidate in another race announce just this morning how much he'd raised in the first 45 days. Can you tell us how your fundraising has gone since the last report?
We're doing very well since the last report. We are. And I've never spent a lot of money on campaigns. I'm not a big spender.
Yep. You have enough money to prosecute the rest of this race?
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, in the other race in which an incumbent is being challenged, the Land Commission race, Commissioner Bush has got gazillions more than the challenger, Mr. Patterson. How come you and Mr. Blocker are so close? I guess I have to ask this question. It's going to sound negative. I don't mean for it to, but if you're doing such a good job, why don't you have a significantly bigger cash advantage? Why is industry not because industry hates to bet against a winner. They're very worried that if they support a challenger that the incumbent's going to get in with a long memory. So why is industry not racing to support you? Why is your financial situation not significantly better than your challengers?
Well, the reason is that I've spent my time as a commissioner. I'm the first commissioner in a long time that's actually wanted to be commissioner, not a candidate for something else. So I've spent my time, and we've talked about this a little bit earlier, retooling the whole agency. I have just put my nose to the grindstone, retooling that whole agency, and I haven't been out raising money.
But you understand that you've got to raise money.
And I've got enough. I've got plenty.
So you think
we're going to be fine.
You're going to be fine?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, very good.
We're going to be fine.
Let's go to questions from the audience. We have a microphone. We'll go around, and we got 1, 2 here in the front. Thank you, Commissioner.
Excuse me.
Sir.
Good morning, Commissioner. Texas cities are getting bigger in population and in land size.
Correct.
Very fast. We're seeing a lot of farmland on the fringes of our big cities being paved over rapidly to become subdivisions. Most of this is county land with minimal land regulation. What role does the Ag Department have, or should it have, in preserving this kind of farmland?
Is it your place to have that conversation?
That's basically the legislature has oversight over that. I did, when I was in the legislature, pass a bill to make a non-annexation agreement for agricultural land, so cities cannot annex agricultural land. They have to offer them a non-annexation agreement, and that's still in law today. But you're right, we are losing an equivalent of like 1 farm a month here in Texas to urban encroachment. But we are actually gaining more farms every year, but they're getting a little smaller. So we do have a lot of people that are retiring, professionals that are moving back into the countryside, being what I call a lot of gentleman farmers, putting in vineyards or wineries or orchards or things like that. So,
but Commissioner, to the gentleman's point, we now have 6 of the 20 largest cities in the country according to the census. No state has more big cities than we do, and 75% of the population of Texas now is east of I-35. The rural counties and the rural communities are declining in population, and that's not going to reverse itself. So if you're the guy charged with preserving the way of life that once was, what do you do? How do you ensure that that tradition in Texas persists?
Well, we do that. We promote, traditional values, our heritage. We're very involved in getting young farmers started. We have a Texas Agriculture Finance Authority. We have a grant program where we help young people get started in agriculture. We promote things like aquaponics, small urban gardening, things like that. So we reach out. We're into the schools. We have Meet the Farmer Day at the schools. We have school gardens where we furnish gardening kits for the young kiddos to get out, grow their own vegetables for their lunches. So we're very, very involved, getting the younger generations involved in agriculture and trying to show them where their food comes from.
But you know, you're pushing against the trend at the moment.
We are pushing against it, but you said that agriculture has 1 in 7 jobs.
Indeed.
There was actually about a month ago, a new stat came out, it's 1 in 5 now. So
it's moving more in the direction of
it
ag.
is, yeah.
Okay, very well. Woman in the front here. Yes.
Hi, I'm a student and I'm also a member of a third-generation farming family. My grandfather purchased our farm after he came back from World War II. My mother grew up there with her siblings. My aunt and uncle still live out there. This border wall is going to cut our farm in half, essentially. It's bringing a lot of difficulties and heartaches, including eminent domain issues, worries about the safety of my family and of people who work on the farm if they go south of the wall and get cut off from EMS, worries about the difficulty of raising and financing crops south of the wall. So my question to you is kind of to reiterate what Evan's question was to you earlier. What kind of conversations have you had with your staff to see about getting farming families like mine back to full capacity once this goes through?
Well, my question to you would be, can you farm that property now because of the cartel and the violence? And where is it? Is it in the Winter Garden area? Where's your place located?
Alamo, Texas, Hidalgo County, actually now far.
But from far?
South of McAllen.
South of McAllen? Okay. That's a pretty intense area down there. Probably, 70% of the cartel traffic comes through that part of the state. So it's one of those areas that we do need a wall, but I think we should respect those property rights. In your case, we need to make sure that we put that in the most advantageous, not only for the security of our nation, but also taking the consideration of those longtime farm families down there. Certainly an advocate for that, in the placement of that wall for the least disruption as possible. I don't know. I'm curious as why it would go right through the middle of a farm. Seemed like we could put it, on a perimeter or something like that would be a much better choice.
But isn't that though the choice that is having to be made all along the border? We've reported on a community where the church that is the principal place of worship in the community, based on the design of the location of the wall, would be actually on the other side of the wall, and the community will be cut off from its from its place to go to work. I mean, that is the choice essentially along the border. There are a lot of instances of this.
Right, but those are not necessarily, set in concrete. Those items can be changed.
Well, they're about to be set in concrete.
And negotiated.
Yeah.
They can be negotiated.
Yeah. Gentleman in the front. Sorry. You have an outside voice, I'm just guessing, but we'll get the microphone here. Sir.
I'd like to ask the commissioner a question, maybe coming back a little bit more to the agency. Ag is big in Texas. We're one of the biggest states. Everybody knows. We have a very small TDA. As far as other states go, we're not putting a lot of money into our growth, with 10 to 20% of ag exports of most commodities, especially the big commodities, being exported now. What do we need to do as ag to bring ag back to TDA, to let you help us? That's where I'd like to see some answers maybe for us in the next term to help grow that, because you know how big ag is here as well as anybody. And we're talking a lot about a lot of factors that don't really get into TDA's battleground. And so I'd ask that question if I could, Sid.
And you talked about the fact that the legislature did not sufficiently give you the resources you felt you needed to run the agency. Is that the first place you have to go, to the legislature?
No, I don't think so. I think we can be self-sufficient. I don't think we need to use taxpayer dollars. Let me just put this in perspective. The largest agriculture state is California. And I hate to be second to California at anything, but they have an $80 billion wine industry, okay? Their agriculture department has a little over 2,500 employees. Now, they don't do the food nutrition that we do, and that's the lion's share of what we do. The third place state is California, and they do the food nutrition, and they have a little over 4,500 agriculture employees in their Department of Agriculture. I have 704, and I think we're doing just as good or better job than either one of those two states. But Texas does lead the nation in agriculture exports, cotton, cattle, wool, mohair, horses, sheep, goats, hay. It goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
So it is, like I think you said, over a $100 billion industry.
Right?
It's a $115 billion industry. From the latest stats we have, that's probably going down. We've had some low commodity prices. On the new ones come out, we probably probably be under 100, unfortunately.
So I guess the questioner's point, I hope I'm taking this right, is does the agency need to grow, or does the agency need to do more, given everything you're saying? You're saying that the footprint, you like this footprint versus California because you're accomplishing more than them, but do you need to be bigger?
Well, here's what we've done,
Yeah.
and this is part of retooling the agency that we didn't get into. We have a marketing program called the Go Texan program. It's been around a while, and it's to help entrepreneurs, small businesses get into HEB or on Amazon and market their jelly or beef jerky or barbecue sauce, whatever they're making. When I became commissioner, I instituted a global outreach program. So we took Texas around the globe marketing these commodities I just talked about. So we were on every continent on the globe the first 12 months of my administration. You know, I made a trip to China, I've been to Israel, I've been to Germany, we've, you know, went to visited 13 African nations. Sudan is wanting to buy 25,000 head of dairy cattle, 5,000 head a year for the next 5 years. We were instrumental in getting the talks started on U.S. beef back into China.
Yep.
I even have an office and one employee in Argentina now. We are doing tremendous trade with Central and South American countries on genetics. We're going to host over 22 foreign countries, Central and South American countries, during the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo.
Yep.
So Texas is an easy sell. You just show up, and basically they will want to do business with you.
So this is how you accomplish what the questioner is asking, is
Yes.
through that first thing I mentioned, which was
Aggressively market
promote production agriculture, marketing
Right.
the state.
And we've done that to the extreme, and
That-
it's been
that's the
very
answer.
successful.
That's it. Good.
Very successful.
Okay. We're out of time? We're out of time. Please give Commissioner Miller a big hand. Thank you very much, sir, for being here. Thank you for being here. We'll see you again. Thanks, sir. I appreciate your time, as always. Thank you so much. Good. We'll have you again. Thanks.
Let's see here.
Feel better. Thank you, Mark.